I don't know if it's better. It doesn't sound worse. Okay, I guess we need to. You don't know the theme song yet, do you? I picked a theme song, but I didn't send it to you.
All right. So why did you not do that?
Well, what happened? I saw it and I was like, oh, cool. And then I thought I sent it to you, and then I was like looking for it again to find it again.
Yeah.
And I went through my messages to you like, oh, I'll just find where I sent it to Luke, and I hadn't sent it to you, and then it's a little 40 second kind of. It's like a beat with a bit of funky rap on it.
Back up, chump, Biggie Smalls rips it quick and kicks it quick. You know how black niggas get. With the hoods, fatigues, with the boots, with trees. All flipping trees, making crazy G's. Hitting buckshots at niggas that open spots on the avenue. Take my loot and I'm bagging. Pimping hoes that drive Volvos and rodeos. Flash the roll, make them wet in they pantyhose. Damn, a nigga style is unorthodox. Grip the Glock when I walk down the crowded blocks. Just in case a nigga wanna act out, I just black out and blow the motherfucking back out. That's a real nigga for you.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the film review podcast where we look at films that have been released relatively recently at the cinema and see whether or not they still hold up. I am Michael and this is my co-host Luke, and today we are reviewing Christopher Nolan's film Dunkirk.
Yes,
Luke?
I'll tell you a bit about Dunkirk. Released in July 2017, had a budget of $100 million and at the box office grossed $525.6 million, directed by Christopher Nolan.
Starring Harry Styles.
Yes.
I know you were a bit excited about that, Luke.
I'll tell you about Harry Styles. I had no idea he was in the movie. Like, I just didn't have a clue. And so when I saw him, I was so surprised. I was like, oh my god, it's fucking Harry Styles in a proper Hollywood movie. Was he an actor? I had no idea.
Yeah, see, I remember hearing that Harry Styles was in a movie, and not remembering what movie it was. And then when I saw him in this movie, it wasn't like, oh wow, Harry Styles is in a movie, because I was like, oh wait, this is the film he was in. Obviously, you watched this film at the cinema.
Yes, I did.
So you kind of have more of a, you've got that experience of the theatrical thing. I actually didn't watch the film at the cinema. In fact, I was in Dunkirk when this film came out.
Oh wow.
We were going down to France. It was not a good holiday, frankly, just because of the weather. But I remember we went to Dunkirk and it was kind of bad weather, and I was like, oh, maybe we should go to the cinema and go see Dunkirk in Dunkirk, but we didn't end up doing that.
Well, that would have been really great.
I know, it would have been so meta, but
very meta.
I think the weather just got too good and ruined it. So I'm going to ask this, Luke, did you like this film?
I kind of liked it.
Ooh, that's
lukewarm.
That is reassuring, because I was going to have a equally kind of not negative but ambivalent response. I mean, the thing about this film with me actually is I felt ambivalent the first time I watched it, and then actually the more I watched it, the more I disliked it. And I didn't think I disliked it completely, but maybe we'll talk a bit more about the specifics when we reach the end. I think, are there any general points you sort of just noticed going through it, just to not get into that big meaty subject of...
Well, there are a few little things. Watching it the second time round, I mean, obviously the movie starts off with, obviously the guy, what's he called, Tommy, the main character. He's running away from the Germans getting shot at, and he meets that French guy who's stealing a British soldier's clothes. And when I watched that the first time, I had no idea what was going on. So I just thought it was very weird, like the whole scene. And obviously watching it back the second time, oh, he's French and he's stealing his clothes. Alright, that makes sense. But yeah, I didn't know what was going on there.
Yeah, you know what, I mean, I found the film quite hard to follow, and I hate to admit it, but I was a bit thrown off by the fact that a lot of the characters looked quite similar. They all had generally dark brown hair, and it took me kind of, I mean, I could tell the difference vaguely, but it was kind of like, the first time you were seeing the characters, for me, it wasn't so easy to be like, oh, that's the guy, from earlier. I was just like, okay, I know that these people have all been doing things throughout the film.
I was just going to say, they all had the same sort of tan as well. I did notice that they all have the same shade of skin colour. Like they're all look like they've been tanned a bit.
You're saying all white people look the same.
I did actually notice that. And they all had very square jaws, or a lot of the main characters at least.
Yeah, I guess they were all quite generically attractive. Which I think is generally true of films. So maybe that's just not a fair thing.
Oh, they all wear the same clothes as well, obviously.
Yes, all in the same clothes. Terrible character design. Speaking of tans, actually, one of the things that I found interesting is that I was watching it, and the weather isn't very good. And I know that's a weird thing to notice, but I kind of thought to myself, obviously they're in northern France, which isn't guaranteed to be warm, but I believe the Dunkirk evacuations happened around the time that the film was released. So in the summertime.
Oh wait, no. I'm just reading the plot, and it said the fall of France. Now I thought that meant autumn, but it means actually fall. Yeah.
Yes, but I actually looked up because I was looking around, and I found out that apparently the weather was actually very good for the Dunkirk evacuations, and one of the things that was mentioned as a minor inaccuracy about the film is that the weather was good. Obviously, I don't know how that doesn't particularly bother me, although I was thinking it's very rare in kind of a World War II film that you see bright sunshine. It's always kind of grey, which I guess is pathetic fallacy if you remember GCSE English. The weather reflecting the mood. But Christopher Nolan, I think his general colour palette probably works quite well for a war film. He seems to like his greys and murky colours.
Oh, he loves greys and blacks and
he loves blacks. Oh, actually, you know what? Speaking of loving blacks, I one of the things I did notice, and I noticed this, it took me until the third time to notice this, and I don't know what this says about me, but there's a scene where the French people, they're trying to get onto the boat, and this guy's going, English only, Nigel Farage, English only, and one of the things I know is you can see, presumably, West African soldiers in the background who are obviously, part with the French.
I saw that as well.
And I kind of found it surprising in a way that you saw them, and it's like, oh yeah, and ethnic minorities fought in this war, but then they're kind of not touched, which I don't know. I mean, I guess this is very irrelevant, but are you at all familiar with there being a controversy around the release of the game Battlefield 1?
No, I'm not, no.
Okay, it's typical kind of gamer stuff. Basically, they released film set in World War One, and one of the characters, I think maybe more than one, like a handful of the characters you play as are black, and everyone was like, ugh, it's political correctness gone mad. I don't want
alt-right.
I don't want black people
alt-right thing ever
in my war. But yeah, I thought, I was kind of thinking about that. Like, I bet there's some people who are just like, ugh, why did they put black people in this? Why did they be historically accurate and acknowledge that there were black people at Dunkirk? But I don't. Yeah. Talking about race again.
Yes,
I was.
You can't help it.
I know, it's terrible.
One other thing I wanted to talk about, obviously we just touched on Christopher Nolan and his characteristics when it comes to movies. There was a lot of aspect ratio changes.
Oh my! I wrote that too. I had that down.
Yeah.
And the thing I wrote about it is that it was arbitrary, because I noticed it the first time, but it was one of those things where I'd be watching it and suddenly I'd realise, hold on a minute, it's changed.
Yeah.
And then I was just watching it really intensely, like, what is the significance of it changing? And there didn't seem to be any reason for it to change.
Yeah, he did that in Dark Knight, obviously. That was
the thing is, there's a video, maybe you've watched it. It's by I think it's a YouTube channel called Now You See Me or Now You See It. Now You See Me would make more sense, but I don't know. It's talking about aspect ratio changes, and one of the things that they kind of talk about in that is how, you know, aspect ratio changes are used a lot to signify something in a film. And in The Dark Knight Rises, it's used when he confronts Bane for the first time. And
so there's a method to it.
Yeah, there's a method to it. But in this film, I couldn't. At first, I thought it was like, okay, when they're up in the air, you know, doing the airplane stuff, it's you know, not, it's kind of bigger. It takes up the whole screen. And then when it's on the ground, but then that wasn't true. There seemed to be no logic to it at all, and I don't know that I hated that there was no logic to it, but also, I don't know, I mean, it was just one of those things where if you notice it, you assume, well, there's got to be a reason why they did that, and then, you know, I mean, obviously Christopher Nolan seems to be famous for his obsession with IMAX cameras, and they apparently, you know, give this bigger, you know, like, I don't know what the opposite is to kind of widescreen when it takes up the whole thing.
I don't know either.
I didn't pick up on my terminology.
Well, yeah, he does seem to just change the aspect ratio indiscriminately. Like, it doesn't really have a meaning. Like, I didn't know it had a meaning in The Dark Knight, but it definitely didn't have a meaning in this film. Also, another thing that was similar to The Dark Knight was Tom Hardy's voice. It sounded a lot like Bane.
They sounded, I know, it was kind of okay, cheerio chaps, let's go get them. But I was thinking that.
There was one point in particular where it was like midway through the movie, he sounded like exactly like Bane. Like, it was just exactly the same voice. Yeah,
it's I guess, well, Bane kind of talks like he's from the past. He talks like, as you'll know, the introductory voiceover to The Legend of Korra.
There you go. One more thing before we can dive in. I just want to say that the character George, you know, the guy who dies, or the kid, he is very ugly. And I know we talked about before how all of the characters look the same, but he did not. He was very distinct, and I'm
well, you know what? It's annoying. Sorry, I was going to say it's annoying because all the characters on the boat looked different. We had our only blonde character on the boat as well, and it's annoying because those characters, you didn't need to be able to tell them apart because they weren't part of this mass of soldiers, and yet the mass of soldiers all looked completely the same.
Maybe it was an artistic choice to make everybody look the same.
You know,
maybe it was.
That is charitable, but maybe not entirely unreasonable.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is George is like quite ugly. I'm surprised he was cast.
Well, the thing about George is,
the actor,
I want to talk about how dumb he is. So there's one of the things that happens is he comes out, and when they're just about to leave, he jumps on the boat, and the dad, who's not his dad, but you know, he's the dad, says, you know, we're going to war, don't come. And he says, I'll be useful. And I wrote down in my notes when I saw that, your job is to ferry soldiers back from a war zone. The one thing your presence can't be is useful. You are only taking up space.
Yeah,
there's no reason for you to be there. You know,
I think he's not thinking logically. He just wants to be a hero.
Yes. Also, they call him a hero at the end, and you've got to be honest, he was. I mean, I can understand writing him up as a hero, and I you know, kudos to the editor for doing that. But really, let's be honest, he wasn't a hero.
No, I wrote that down in my notes as well. What did I say specifically? He dies, but in a pathetic way. Like, falls down the stairs.
You know what it reminds me of? We're gonna go for a 2 for 2 on this. In World War Z, there's a scene. The first kind of death of a quasi major character is they're walking onto this aeroplane and it's raining, and he slips and shoots himself in the head. And it's like people just. There seems to be something about people falling over, and it's also on the subject of good war films. There's a really good war film called I think it's called Buffalo Soldiers, and it's about these Americans stationed in West Germany, and I call it a war film, but the whole point of the film basically is that it isn't a war film because no fighting happens, because there wasn't a war in Germany during the Cold War. But the idea is it's kind of following these soldiers who are basically in West Germany with nothing to do, and they kind of get across the fact that it's not a traditional war film, because the first way someone dies is they're playing American football indoors, and he gets tackled and he smashes his head on the corner of a table, and then it just cuts to this guy, a general or whatever, writing this letter, and he's like, oh, we really value sacrifices in war, but basically this guy didn't die in battle, but it was nonetheless a heroic sacrifice for the American fight against the Soviets. And
stop being so politically correct. Just say he fucking hit his head on the floor and died.
Yeah,
he's no hero.
It was interesting. I mean, I don't have, again, this is just something I have no opinion on really, but obviously Cillian Murphy, I think it's pronounced Cillian.
Yes.
He is responsible for George banging his head. And at first, he kind of, when George is going blind, Cillian says, is he okay? And Blondie says, no, he's not. And then when obviously George dies, Cillian says, is he going to be alright? And Blondie says, yeah, he is. And I just found it like, it's nice of Blondie to not rub it in. Like, no, you killed him. You've just like you're responsible for the death of all your comrades at war. You just can't stop killing people. Yes.
No, I was okay with that, obviously.
Yes, I didn't.
It was the right thing to do.
I had a few things on the subject of stupidity, actually.
Okay.
There's a scene very towards the beginning where there's kind of, they're getting bombed, and it's quite a nice scene in theory. And the first time I watched it, and I thought I was going to like the film a lot more than I did for the first few minutes. And there's a scene where they're kind of lying on the floor, and these bombs kind of go in a line, like bang, 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 and then obviously a guy right next to him blows up. And I was watching it, but then I thought, hold on a minute, why were they just lying there rather than trying to avoid the bombs? And then next time I went back and watched it, and you see the guy who gets hit by a bomb is looking up, firing his gun, and you think, I'm not going to be a backseat general here, but I'm just thinking, surely, the rate that the bombs are falling at, it would be worth at least trying to move away from them.
Yeah, they say, oh, we can't do anything. We have to just stand still. That was kind of the attitude. I don't know if that's realistic, if that happened that way, if they were told to just stand like that, but I can't imagine they would.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're the bloody Russians. There's also a bit where a guy goes under, I think he's the main character, kind of, if this film has a main character, the guy who we start off with. I don't know his name.
Yeah, Tommy, that's his
Tommy.
name.
There we go, okay. He goes underwater to escape a bomb, which again, I don't know if... the thing is, you can attribute a lot of this to, I guess, just these soldiers maybe not thinking logically, but obviously it damages his ears. But I found out by watching a YouTube video, the shockwave of an explosion in a swimming pool will actually probably kill you from breaking your bones and stuff. Obviously, I don't think he was close enough for that, but still, it's going to hurt your ears. And not a smart guy. I think I'd be much better at escaping bombs.
Yeah, there's one other thing on the subject of stupidity that I think I should bring up. When the torpedo hits the destroyer, obviously Harry Styles, Tommy and the French guy, they're all on that destroyer, and when the torpedo hits them, obviously they struggle to get out, and I'm just wondering why they you see a shot of them locking all the soldiers in, like they turn that wheel so the door's locked, and I don't know, I just think that's a kind of short-sighted thing to do when obviously something like a torpedo could happen, and then you need to get out quickly. And there was no sort of danger of the door being unlocked, so I don't really know why they were locked in.
It's really similar too in 28 weeks later, when the outbreak happens, they lock everyone together in a hall, and they lock all the doors, and then obviously the zombie gets into that room, and they're screwed. So I think a general rule of thumb is, in tragedies, avoid locking people in places. And also avoid locking soldiers with PTSD in your boat, or else he'll escape and get angry at you and cause you to fall over and hurt your head.
Yes. Rule number 1.
I guess this isn't necessarily stupid, although, see, I don't like in films when people don't talk. So a lot of the time in kind of films, especially artsy films, people will be very silent to the extent that it almost seems unrealistic. And there's this scene at the beginning, very close to the beginning, they're taking this guy in a stretcher to the boat to, get him out there because he's injured. And I'll talk a bit more about this scene later, but the thing is, what you would have expected is they'd be shouting, "Hey, don't leave, we've got a guy here, he's injured, don't leave." But instead it's kind of just really quiet, just walking along, no one's saying anything, just watching, these people like, "Oh, hope we get there in time." And you think, they'd probably wait a second or two if you just shouted ahead, "Oh, there's someone else coming."
Yeah. I mean, in kind of artsy films, I think people don't talk a lot because the director wants to leave things open to perception. Because that's what art is. At the end of the day, it's all different people having different opinions on a piece of art. But in that situation, there was no real reason to be quiet. So you are correct in that. Yes.
I actually have only one more negative nitpick. I don't know how many you have, but
that's it for me.
At the end, Tom Hardy he does this kind of heroic sacrifice thing where he stays over on kind of the French side, and then he runs out of fuel and he has to stay there. But the weird thing is, he's quite close to the ground and the British soldiers are still there cheering him. And I think, again, I don't want to be a backseat pilot here, but I'm sure that he could just make sure that he lands closer to them and go back with them. He was like, just a quarter of a mile off the ground maybe, and you could see these soldiers beneath him going, "Hey, hey," and he's like, "Oh gee, sure sucks that I can't just land next to them."
Well, I didn't really think about that much, but what I did think about was the fact that he was, of course, it was the sun was setting by the time his plane touched down on the beach. Why could he have not just floated back over the channel? I mean, it took an hour to get from Dunkirk to the English coast. Surely if there was no Luftwaffe, and by all accounts it doesn't seem like there was any, couldn't he just float back over?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing that I was kind of thinking in this film about how close Dunkirk is to England, because when I was at Dunkirk on my holiday, you could see England from where we were. And it's kind of like there's a bit when they're on a ship, or they've just been taken off a ship and they're kind of floating, and they're in a rowing boat, and they're like, "Hey, let's sail to Dover," and they say, "We can't get to Dover in this," and I think, but people have swam that distance. I mean, I appreciate maybe it's difficult, but I would have thought, it's surprising kind of how, I mean, there's kind of a way in which you can see it's sort of clever because it's, so close yet so far.
Yes.
But then there's another element of, surely they could actually, a lot of the time get across. I mean, I guess...
I mean, I'm not that fit. I mean, I'm kind of fit, but I'd give it a go, swimming across. I mean, people have done it.
Yeah, I think I would probably not be willing to swim all the way across, but I think if I was in a boat and the boat had already got, a third of the way and it was sinking, Rather than swimming a third of the way back, I'd be like, well, I might as well swim 2/3 of the way home.
Yeah. Well, this is really backseat general or whatever.
Yes,
What did you
yes,
call
we
it?
are. If I can just swim across.
Yeah, because this actually happened in real life. This isn't just a movie thing. This is a historical event. So can't really nitpick like history.
Speaking of nitpicks, I'm actually done in terms of nitpicks. I do have one thing which isn't a nitpick. It's the opposite to a nitpick. It's just a general positive. I liked that they kind of at the end played off this perception of Dunkirk being a failure, because when I was at English literature, doing English literature as a young boy, one of the questions one of the kind of things that we were dealing with in one of the books we were looking at was this idea of what's a hero. And I remember reading someone saying, like, you know, in classical societies, people wouldn't view Dunkirk as heroic, and like obviously there's kind of this element of it's kind of weird and an interesting topic to explore, this idea that Dunkirk is perceived as one of the greatest military successes of World War II, and it was a retreat. And then you imagine, you know, just on the other side of Eurasia there was Japan, and I can't imagine, you know, based on the Japanese sort of military culture, that they would ever say that a retreat could be considered a success. But, you know, you've created this abandoning of France and, you know, all of mainland Europe to Germany, and been like, well, you know, we got out of there alive with, you know, most of our army intact, and that's a success. And I think it's kind of interesting that they did play with that a bit at the end with the sort of reading a newspaper article. That's a fair point. I guess you could look at it as a failure. Oh, by the way, why do you have Mahmoud Ahmadinejad? I've been meaning to ask you this. You know what? It's from like ages ago when I was at school, and I think I think it actually came from, there was a 4chan thread, and it was kind of like someone said something, and that face is kind of like the response of like, not bad. Like that's kind of the face he's doing, and I saw it and I was like, oh, that's a great face. So it's kind of a not bad sort of face.
Okay.
I think the actual original kind of line of text beneath it was like would bang or something, but I don't know. I'm going to reveal my headings to you. I didn't want to tell you my headings because it would give away what I thought of the film. And I wanted that to be kind of a reveal, because I thought, by the way, that you were going to like this film more than you said you would. Like, obviously you said that you kind of liked it. And therefore I was expecting, you know, maybe when I said that I didn't like it so much, you'd be a bit surprised. Obviously I didn't get that fantastic reaction, but the thing that I wrote for kind of structure was I just wrote not enough happening.
Well, if we talk about first the overall structure, and what I mean by that is obviously it's the story is told on 3 places: land, sea and air. And obviously when you're on the land, on the beach, it's 1 week until they get rescued. On the boat it's 1 day, and on the air it's one hour. And I don't know about you, but I found it a bit confusing.
Yes.
They have to do it like that, obviously, because you can't have just a load of scenes and then another load of scenes. You know, it has to be split up into 3. You know, it can't be just 3 separate parts. It has to be all together throughout the movie. But see, I went to watch it with some people while I watched it in America, you know, I was working there over the summer and went to watch it with a few of my colleagues, and I wasn't, but they were confused about the timing of the movie, what was happening when.
Stupid Americans.
No, they were all English.
Oh, stupid English people.
Yeah. So I got it like kind of straight away, but I could understand why they were confused, because it kind of does jump around a bit. For example, there's this point is in the beginning of the movie, when, you know, the stretchers are being loaded onto the boat, and the music intensifies, and the movie is, you know, being very intense. But this music continues as on the boat they're putting life jackets in the boat, back in England. So it makes it seem like these two things are happening at the same time, because there's not like a change in the music and intensity, and then it goes to the plane. Of course, all these three things are happening at different times, but the way the movie makes it just makes it seem like it's happening all at the same time. And so I can understand why there may have been a bit of confusion with people watching, like, oh, wait, is this happening at the same time, or is this different?
Yes, I think overall, to be honest, I would say on balance, I didn't like that they did it with they could have got away with having the weird, non-chronological thing going on. Do you remember in Kill Bill when there's a non-chronological scene and it just broke Dylan's mind?
No.
She's been buried alive, and it cuts back to her with her master. I forget the master's name, but he teaches her how to punch through wood.
Yes.
And then it cuts to her back in the coffin, and she
that's like a
punches through.
flashback, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and Dylan was like, "Hold on a minute, what's she doing there? She was just in a coffin." But yes, I think so. Some people do obviously struggle with non-chronological stuff.
Yes.
I think the thing is,
but this movie didn't make it easy to.
Yes,
understand.
the film did made it more complicated than it needed to, which
Yes.
I do think is.
Also, can
yes.
I just point out that the boats obviously they're going to save all the soldiers, and the planes are going to save the soldiers. So at the beginning when it starts, obviously there's a week to go. The soldiers they're going to survive, or the main characters are going to survive, because they're going to be at the end of the movie being saved by the boats and the planes. So that kind of removes a bit of the tension as well.
Yeah. I do, yeah. So I didn't have. I think pretty much you've covered what I had to say about the structure itself. My not enough happening thing. One of the things I wanted to bring up is that, actually, let me just check that we're still recording. I'm still recording. Good. Always got to check that. Well, one of the things that I wanted to or noticed, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the case, is we are not going to be talking about this film for as long as we were talking about Get Out.
No.
And there's a reason for that, which is a lot less is going on in this film than was going on in Get Out.
Yes.
And I think that it kind of bothers me in a way, because this is a film. It's a bit like Breaking Bad, in that it's very long and not that much happens, and it's only good once you reflect on the hour and a half you've just watched and you think, okay, like a handful of things happened, but it's not like one of those things where you're just so much is happening. I don't think we saw a single German's face in this entire film.
We saw a Dutch guy's face.
Yes,
that kind of counts.
Which is kind of crazy for a World War II film. So my problem with the film, I think, generally, is that there didn't seem to be enough excitement. And
yes,
one of the things that I wanted to see was kind of the aerial warfare was very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And on the subject of you bringing up the fact that the air part starts an hour before the evacuation.
Yes.
But I was watching it and I was thinking, why are there so few aeroplanes? So I googled this because I wanted to know, and it turns out that actually there were relatively few aeroplanes during the actual evacuation, but funnily enough, about a week before the evacuation there were a lot of aeroplanes. And I kind of think one of the things I would have preferred in hindsight about this film, considering it was a bit of a slow burn throughout the majority of it, is if it would have started with a bit of an actual kind of bombastic aerial dogfight.
I do agree with that point. Well, you mentioning obviously that nothing much happens in the movie, and that is because I think for whatever reason Christopher Nolan decided this movie was just going to be like a load of intense scenes with a lot of like, obviously he wanted to build up suspense, and certainly the movie. You mentioned you'd like the start of the movie, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes.
Although actually, I would like to amend that statement slightly.
Okay.
I liked the start of the movie when I was watching it, but I think in hindsight, given that the film didn't have much going on in general, what I was kind of expecting when I saw the start of the movie, it was going to be a slow burn that got more and more kind of elaborate and over the top.
Yes, well,
So-
yeah. The intensity, I mean, it starts off really good. Like, I remember, I wrote this down. Even the second time of watching it, it gets you kind of scared, especially at the beach scene. It's like, oh, this is really good, wow. But the problem is there's too many scenes like that, and it dilutes the first scene and all the rest of the scenes. It just makes the intense scenes less intense, and just means that ultimately, well, it's kind of ironic. Like, it's meant to be exciting because there's all these incredibly, supposedly exciting scenes, but midway through the movie, it's like, okay, I've seen this like the 36th time. There's danger. The music's building up. They're going to survive, and eventually it just becomes like, it's not that exciting. I wish something else would happen.
Yes, that's kind of, I was thinking about that. One of the things that I wrote down is that, and to be honest, I only added to this just a minute ago when you were bringing something up. The problem with the film that I noticed is that every ship sinks. So they get the film basically is they get on a ship, it sinks. They get straight after that, they go onto a boat to another ship which sinks, and then they go back to the thing and they get on a other ship and that starts to sink, and then they go past this other ship and that's sinking, and you think, obviously I think the reason that happens in a way is because obviously these events are happening over the course of a week, all these ships sinking.
Yes.
But the way you're watching it, you just think, I don't care. And then there's a scene where there's a bomber and it's kind of going over the one of the small civilian ships, and it's like trying to be really intense, like, oh no, it's going to sink the ship, and I'm like, oh no, a ship sinking? That sounds, no, not that.
Oh no, we're going to have another scene of them scrambling to get out a boat and almost
I know,
drowning.
it was, I mean, the problem is it was the same thing happening over and over again, and there wasn't really a raising of stakes. The other thing that I want to bring up on the subject of kind of, because actually you wrote the intensity, to be honest, I wrote my heading for this, my second point was there's no tension leading up to the evacuation, and I think that is not entirely true, because there was, and I do admit, when I was first watching the film, I felt tension. But the thing is, I think when you realise it's just, oh, a ship sinks, and then, oh, another ship sinks, oh, and then, and you just think it's not as tense when you look at it like that. And the scene that kind of, looking back on it, I was like, oh, that's a sign of things to come, is, and this is, I'm returning back to, they're getting this wounded guy onto the ship at the beginning of the film, and they're going through it, and everyone's cheering them on. They're like, yeah, go on, do it, and there's all these kind of little mini challenges, like they have to get across this board, and they get there, it's the last minute, you're worried the ship's going to leave, but they get there in time, they put him on the ship sinks, and the guy just drowns.
Yes, I was thinking that. I was like, oh yeah, well, he's dead. Like, yes, and it's just, and the movie relies on that sort of intensity, just too much. There's not really a story or a plot, so much to speak. I mean, that's the thing. If this movie was like concocted in like Christopher Nolan's head, like Dunkirk never happened, and he just like made this movie, it wouldn't do that well. It wouldn't be reviewed that well, because like nothing actually happens. Like you say.
Yeah. See, one of the things is actually I expected you to like this film quite a bit, and one of the reasons for that is because I thought, and I don't know why, I think we had a conversation before and you kind of used this reasoning to defend a film before, which is that obviously this film I think is probably quite accurate. And the defense of this film that I imagine people might give is, well, you know, it's accurate because there weren't, you know, in real life, aeroplane battles are kind of boring, and, you know, in real life, blah blah blah, and in real life, ships just sank all the time. And I think the problem with that is, and this is my kind of stance, I am a huge advocate of modifying reality to be more cinematic, because you can't take a whole battle and just shrink it down to 1.5 hours. You've got to kind of squish things together. So
well, yeah, I'll just say this: I'm less of an advocate of that. But the problem with this is, I don't think that movie is, well, I guess, historically accurate in the sense that these characters are fictional. Like, they don't actually exist. They're not actually telling a story which happened. It's something that Christopher Nolan created. And so, why don't you create a story within Dunkirk that is actually interesting? Like a plot. You don't need to. You know, you can't use that as an excuse. Oh, I was just being historically accurate. You know, because these stories didn't actually happen. Harry Styles' character didn't actually exist.
Harry Styles wasn't at 1 out of 10. Harry Styles wasn't at Dunkirk. No, I wrote down in terms of the film not having any tension. For me, one of the problems was there wasn't that much character building. I mean, you've got this guy who doesn't say anything, and then this other guy who says even less because he's French. So you've got Tommy hardly said anything, and then Frenchie McGee says nothing, and then Harry Styles says like probably the most out of anyone who's actually on the in the kind of main ragtag crew.
Yeah,
but he doesn't have, you know, there's no kind of character. I mean, I'm going to bring up Red Letter Media again. Okay, the classic example of, you know, character building is that scene in the Phantom Menace Plinkett review where he says, describe this character without mentioning their physical appearance or what they do in the film. And, you know, the joke is no one can do it, and that shows that the Phantom Menace has bad character building. But in this film, I mean, it would be almost laughable to even imagine, like, how could you describe any of these characters in any way?
So I'm guessing Christopher Nolan, if he was confronted with that, he'd say it's an artistic choice.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like just showing that it's not about the soldiers. It's just about Dunkirk and the actual miracle of saving them. Well, that's might as well just be a documentary then. A movie's meant to have a plot. A movie's meant to have characters. And there was a perfect chance, actually. It was halfway through the movie to have a bit of character building when the Frenchie McGee, old Tommy Boy, and Harry Styles, their boat had been, or the destroyer had been sank. They'd swam to the beach again, and they were all sitting on the beach. Do you remember? All next to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously then they see a boat in the distance that's on the beach, and they go to it with a load of other people who look similar to them. But yeah, there was like they were all sitting on the beach, and they didn't say anything. And I was just thinking that would be a perfect chance to add some like character development and backstory, and maybe Harry Styles says, "Oh God, I lost my brother here." I don't know, something like that.
The problem is that would involve talking, and everyone knows that only plebeians who only plebeians want characters who talk in their films.
Yes, it's much better just to have them sit silently and just wonder how. It is. The movie does come across as a bit pretentious.
But, speaking of Christopher Nolan being a pretentious twat, I actually have one point, and we've got brilliantly into this because on my subject of not enough happening, the one last thing I wrote down was that I think all of it is because, on the subject of his artistic choices, this film doesn't use very much CGI. And so I looked this up, and I was pretty sure this would be true without even having to look it up, but he requisitioned some Spitfire, fighters, and they are the actual, you see them flying in the film, and they're actual Spitfires flying. And I think a lot of people, they want to go, oh, that's impressive, that's a lot of effort. The problem is, you have seen, I'm guaranteeing, anyone listening to this, and you yourself, have seen countless CGI planes in films, and you didn't notice they were CGI, because CGI nowadays is more than capable, with a sufficient budget and sufficient time, of producing photorealistic planes. And if he would have used CGI, then you could have had more happening. I think he limits himself, and I've never liked how Christopher Nolan is just obsessed with not using CGI. I didn't like it in Batman: The Dark Knight Rises when everyone says, "Oh, they crashed an actual plane. They didn't use CGI," and it's like, okay, so they just wasted money and time then.
Yeah.
It would have looked just the same if they used a CGI plane. Millions of other, or not millions, but dozens of other directors use CGI planes all the time, but Christopher Nolan, he can't do that for some reason.
Yeah, he needs to feel better about himself.
Yes,
His movies
and
are actual movies.
the thing is, up until this point, it's not bothered me too much because it's never affected the quality of his films. Dark Knight Rises, there are criticisms of it, but there's nothing wrong with that plane crash. But in this film, it feels too small, and it feels, like there's not enough. It doesn't feel like a war film. It feels like some people flying a plane around.
Yeah, the planes being real
occasionally.
don't make me enjoy the movie more, basically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've actually got both my 2 points. I have one more point left. That's kind of a big point. Do you have anything that's?
Well, I just wanted to say I was reading a review, and one of the people who I was reading a review of said that Nolan decided to forego a plot, but they still gave it 5 stars. Which I don't think that's a good idea.
Actually, you know what? I wanted to talk about this because I think I came up with a perfect analogy for Christopher Nolan and this film when I was watching this, because the thing is, a lot of people are going to say that this film is really well shot, and it's really. I think that's basically the only thing you can say in defense of this film.
It's beautifully
well shot,
executed.
Yes,
Especially when you see it on the big screen like I did.
Yes, I was going to say. I'm going to get back to that actually in a minute, but or right at the end. But for me, people saying that, what it reminds me of as an Arsenal fan is whenever Arsenal loses a game, everyone always says, "But they played really well." Well, not always, but the thing is, Arsenal, of course, are notorious for having really, a lot of skill. They do a lot of really impressive football, but then they don't score. They don't convert it into goals, and that's kind of my stance on people saying, "Oh, well, Christopher Nolan did really good cinematography. He was a really competent director." And I think, yeah, okay, he was a really competent director, just like Arsenal are really competent football players. But if you don't do that in service of making a good film that's engaging, it's clear and concise and engaging in terms of what you're seeing, but what you're seeing itself isn't engaging.
Yes. The only insight into the main character, or the 3 soldiers that we had, was at the end when Harry Styles says, "Oh, they think we're cowards," and he's really pissed off, how they failed, and that's a good insight into his character.
That's kind of what I was bringing up about the idea of it being a failure.
Yeah, the people on the boat, there's some good characters there. Again, you kind of knew who they were. The old guy. What's he called, Mr. Dawson or something?
His son's dead.
Yeah, his son is dead. Yeah, so and by the way, Mark Rylance I thought was amazing in this. The guy who played Mr. Dawson. I don't know if you thought that as well, but he should be definitely worthy of Oscar consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was pretty good. I mentioned before how I am not great at noticing bad acting, but I think I'm pretty good at. I'm probably better at being like, okay, that's really good acting. And yeah, I did think you kind of, the weird thing about I almost felt like he was my dad. You're just watching it, and you're like, you just feel like he's the viewer's dad.
Yes, exactly. He's a
nice
authority figure who's warm, commanding, knows what he's doing.
Yes.
I
think one of the things that a lot of people say, and this kind of goes back to there not being that much in this film, is that something that a lot of people say about films that are a mess is they say there was a good film in this film, and the kind of what they mean is, if you edited out all the crap, you would have a good film. I think this is kind of the opposite. This is like if there was a good film and then someone edited it and then it kind of got worse. Yeah. I feel like this is almost a bad edit of a good film with slightly more content.
Well, I wrote, Michael, funnily enough,
yes.
I wrote this movie had real potential to be special, because this could have been amazing. It's well crafted, as we've said, but
yes.
if you have some compelling characters and a plot, and the culmination at the end, this could have been one of the best movies ever. Like,
Yeah, well, my
just not in this year, but because it's so well done in terms of
Yeah.
how it's executed. But damn, obviously,
Yes.
Christopher Nolan,
I,
we want to go down that road.
my conclusion is actually what the film should have been. But before that, one of the things I want to talk about, because this is something that I noticed, and it was something that this was the thing most of all that kind of bothered me the more times I saw it, and it's that there's this really weird problem with tone after the evacuation, because, and this is just to blast through this basically, they see these ships coming, and it's an hour and 14 minutes in, and they play this triumphant music and everyone's cheering, and then after that happens you see that they find out that the boy is dead, and there's this whole thing with there's this oil spilling, and Tom Hardy's got to rescue them, from this bomber, and Tom Hardy ultimately fails, and dozens of soldiers get burned alive horribly, and then the kind of main crew, Tommy, Frenchie McGee, and Harry Styles, all have to abandon the ship, and one of them drowns. I don't know. I couldn't. This is me not knowing who the characters were. I think it was the French guy who drowned. You see, well, I'm pretty sure you see someone drown in the ship at the, the ship they're kind of in that's getting shot by the Germans, and it starts to.
Well, he was French, so who cares?
Yes, I don't know. You don't see the French guy after that, do you? So I think he drowns there. But the thing is, so the problem is you've got this kind of
what a
moment of
memorable character.
Yeah, you've got this moment of all these ships coming in. It's this moment where like, oh, they're going to get rescued. They've been on this beach, they've had all these problems, and they're going to get rescued. And then after that, you just have death and horrible burning and failure, and it's like it doesn't make it's just bizarre.
Yeah,
the tone of it.
I thought, the end, the very end, it was uplifting. What's it called? Tommy was reading out a speech from Winston Churchill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I want to talk about that. The incorporation of Winston Churchill's speech, I think, was very well done. And
yes.
An example of kind of why this film could have been so good, because obviously that's such an iconic speech.
Yes.
British history.
Exactly.
Fight them on the beaches.
There's it, but what? The tone, I think, it isn't great, because at the end, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it should have the movie should have ended on like a heroic, like uplifting note, because of all the death and destruction that had gone on before. It just felt like it was misplaced. Like we want this to be a happy movie. Well, certainly we wanted people to leave the cinema feeling happy, feeling like, they did it, well done. But like the whole previous 1.5 or 1 hour and 45 minutes was not happy at all.
Yes,
so it didn't really fit.
Yeah, to be honest, I think this film, I didn't care. Just the end result of it was just at the end, I just thought I didn't really care about anything. And I agree 100%. In fact, I was actually just thinking about this, and it's, I would have preferred to watch a documentary about Dunkirk. Just a film that was like, but I wrote down kind of, because I thought this was useful, and one of the things that I've mentioned before on this show in its long-running history is that one of the ways I kind of judge a film is thinking like, what would I have done differently, and do I think it's better? And like, just to kind of run down what I sort of, and this is a very sort of brief synopsis, but I thought, early on, like I said, it should have opened with, earlier than the film itself starts, or kind of the flight and stuff itself starts, you start with this big battle with the fighters, and you see all these airplanes, and it's exciting, and then you get this thing, because this actually happened. The British government basically tried to stop the fighters, so they said we need to draw the fighters back in order to defend England against the Luftwaffe. And you should have, there could have been a moment where you actually saw these government bureaucrats being like, we're gonna bring the RAF in, and you would have this sensation of, oh no, they're going to be screwed. And then you could have a scene of these soldiers on a beach just getting bombed because the air support has gone away, and you see one destroyer bombed and sink. You don't have to see it happen half a dozen times. You just see one to kind of get across, there's no hope, they're being bombed, there's no hope. And then after that, the British government agrees to send a handful of ace flyers to provide some support, and that's where you get Tom Hardy, and he is this person who has come step forward to go on this, dangerous mission to help these people who are stranded on this beach. And then they also agree to send these civilian ships, but it's like, will they get there on time? And then just when the soldiers, they think all help is lost, they're being bombed. You're seeing these actual soldiers coming in. There's these fighting on the kind of the fronts where they're defending the perimeter, and then the ship arrives and it's triumphant and the audience is relieved. And then maybe you can have one scene where it's like, oh no, a bomber's going to attack a ship or something, and then Tom Hardy, he comes in, he saves the day, no one gets horribly burned alive, and then he does his heroic sacrifice, lands in Dunkirk, and it ends with Winston Churchill gives his great speech, and you think, yes, that's good.
Yeah.
I felt the feeling of these poor soldiers stuck on this place, and you get that sense of relief.
Well, what you're talking about right there, Michael, is a backstory with Tom Hardy. He's an ace flyer and all that, and a plot as well with him saving it. And as we know, backstories and plots are for simpletons.
I know. That's basically. It's that example of just unconventional filmmaking for unconventional filmmaking's sake.
Yes.
It's just, it's good because it's not how people would usually make a film, and that makes it good.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we... do you have anything else to add, or is that good?
No, I think you, and then we can do kind of final thoughts.
Let's do final thoughts, because, I've got nothing else, basically. Covered everything. A lot shorter to get out, this was.
Yes, you can give your final thoughts.
Well, I was just... Okay. So, if we talk about, I guess, the legacy or our final thoughts on this movie, people have suggested that Dunkirk may be an Oscar contender, but to be honest, it's like the 7th in line, to be honest, and it's definitely not going to win. It may win for like some cinematography. I was talking about Best Picture. Will it win an Oscar? That's what I was talking about. But obviously, that sound editing. I believe that's an Oscar. Maybe it'll win there, or cinematography, or camera work. Some technical award. There is a chance that it'll win there. And I just wanted to bring up one thing, Michael. A question, which hopefully you'll answer. Did it make you proud to be British?
No comment. No.
Nigel Farage, I remember when this movie came out, he tweeted about how Dunkirk was amazing and how it made him so proud to be British. And obviously, there's the irony of who were the British actually fighting, Nigel? Eh?
Yes.
Whatever. So did it?
Not really. It's an interesting question. Kind of, what films do make me proud to be British, or what films do I think kind of encapsulate this idea of the British culture that's kind of actually worth being proud of.
Did you not get a bit proud when all the boats were coming in?
Well, yeah, I think the thing is, for me now, that memory is forever tainted by how bizarre, how out of place it was in the rest of it. Just like it felt forced happiness.
That was the British spirit.
This film didn't really make me proud to be British. There are films that could conceivably make me proud to be British. I think, especially World War II films, because of course Britain were fighting Nazis, and that is always a good thing to do.
Yes, I support Nazis being fought.
Yes,
at home and abroad.
Kill Nazis is.
Well, I actually I was in America working at one of those camp things, and some of the kids who I was looking after, they actually went to see it at a different time. So they went on this camp trip. I wasn't with them when they did, and they found the movie quite boring, actually. Yeah. So they went on about how America was the true sort of hero of World War II and all that, and Britain didn't really do much, which irked me a bit, but whatever.
Yes. That is, I mean, the thing is, I do think America is probably better at being patriotic in their films. Like, I could think of a lot of films that I think I can imagine Americans being proud of as Americans.
Yeah.
I can't think of that many films as kind of a British person that specifically kind of show the British as people to be proud of. I think that's just our culture. We're more cynical.
Yes.
So, but yes, I think it was this film in particular would not really make me proud, and I think we can all agree that America can go screw themselves. But
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Let's agree on that.
But yes, my final thoughts. Basically, well, one of the things I was thinking actually as I was watching this film, and I was going to bring this up as kind of an intro point, but then it's always hard to stick things in the intro. To me, this film actually is an example of a film that really vindicates this podcast as an idea, because as we've said, the idea of this podcast is we look at films that are out of the theatre and see if they hold up when you look at them from kind of a level-headed perspective. And like you said, this film is an example of a film that is probably really, really entertaining and interesting to watch at the cinema, and that's why I brought up I didn't watch it at the cinema. And I could completely imagine, people getting a positive response to this film when they go to see it at the cinema. But obviously, then you watch it when you're on your own, on a laptop or whatever, and you think, it kind of gives you a more level-headed perspective when you're actually looking at it, and you don't have that massive, huge screen and a crowd and all that stuff. And I think I've seen people say, I read a handful of reviews, I think, that said, well, I didn't read the whole reviews, but I saw people saying this film is going to go down as one of the greatest war films of all time, and I just think, no, surely not.
No, it won't be.
Yes, and I really do think this is, especially with kind of well-made films like this, that are competently directed and things like that, they have a very kind of convicting power in a theatrical environment where everyone's going to go, it was really well made, and then actually when you lose all of that sort of theatrical fanfare, then you just judge it as a film and you realise it's not that great.
It's over 6 months. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's over 6 months since it's come out, and obviously there's a lot of talk at the time of, this is a really great movie, but now, I kind of referred to to it standing before. I was saying it's nowhere near in line to win Oscar for Best Picture. There's not a lot of talk about it. It's just, it's not that great. It does not hold up as much as people might have thought it would have.
Yes. So be thankful, world, that we are doing this great service of exposing these hacks who make these terrible films and pass them off as genius in the theatre, and then really you realise they're just crap. I think instead of rating films out of 10 now, I'm going to just try and rate every film relative to each other. So all I'm going to say is that this is worse than Get Out, and as we go forward I'm going to try and rate all my films in relation to the other films we've reviewed, and we'll see how long I'm able to do that before it gets too ridiculous.
In episode 100 it's going to be a bit difficult.
Yeah, well, you know what, actually, you and I have spoken about this. Dylan and I obviously planned on doing a Simpsons podcast, and one of the plans for that was to rate every single episode in relation to each other, and considering there's over 600, that would have got a bit so the plan was to be like, okay, this is the kind of idea was to find the ultimate best Simpsons episode. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. I think just for the record, I suppose we should be honest with the audience, because I can't remember exactly what you said, Luke, a minute or so ago, because in fact in real time that wasn't a minute or so ago, because you had a power cut.
Yeah, well, I was basically saying that before the power cut, that the movie doesn't really hold up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we agreed, definitely not going down as the greatest war film of all time.
No. This movie will be forgotten
Yes.
For example, people were comparing it, I saw, to Saving Private Ryan.
No, yeah,
This movie will have nowhere near the legacy of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You know what? Was it an enduring power cut?
No, it was. I said that before.
No, sorry. What I meant was because my experience of power cuts is usually everything goes off for like a second. Maybe it's just because I live down south, and then it. So yeah, did it?
Oh, why would living down south?
Well, we've got better infrastructure.
Oh right, okay.
So everything goes down for a second, and then it's really annoying though because I'm not. I mean, the weird thing is, aren't you using a laptop?
Yeah, I am.
So what?
No, the Wi-Fi.
Oh, the Wi-Fi, of course. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because I was thinking, like, obviously with mine, because I'm using a desktop computer, so it would just be completely silent. It would just turn off, and that would be a disaster. I feel like one of the things that I worry about is, you familiar with an idea called Murphy's Law?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm worried that the longer we continue to do this podcast, the higher the chances that eventually we will record a whole conversation and it will be entirely unusable for some reason. I don't know what it's going to be, but at some point we're going to have a situation where it's going to be like, it turns out it was not really recording and it's just going to be static or something like that, and I'm just not looking. I just know eventually that day is going to happen. I mean,
it's when we've done the 3-hour review of The Last Jedi. That's what's going to happen.
I almost feel like, for the sake of irony, we should be just when we do review the Star Wars films, we should just go nope, and then just no. Obviously no. I know that you wouldn't stand for that. Yeah, I've got some. Yes.
Okay, right. I'll finish it by saying what I thought I'd get out in terms of. I am gonna rate it out of 10 because I like that.
Okay. So, by the way, you just said what I thought of Get Out.
Sorry, what?
You said Get Out instead of Dunkirk. You said I'll just finish it by talking about what I thought of Get Out.
I'll tell you why. Because in between me and you having this conversation, I watched an interview by Stephen Colbert of Daniel Kaluuya, the actor.
Ah.
Yeah.
Did you talk about Trump?
Sorry?
Did you talk about Trump? Because it's a Stephen Colbert report thing, so it's always got to be about Trump with Stephen Colbert.
No, he didn't talk about Trump. He talked about white people.
Oh, that's fine. Same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll say what I think about Dunkirk. So Michael, I am going to rate Dunkirk out of 10. I'm going to stick with it because I think your method might be too complicated of rating movies. By the way, I don't think it's as good as Get Out either. I think I rated Get Out 9 out of 10. I'm going to rate Dunkirk 7 out of 10. It's a solid movie in terms of everything but plot and characters. But it's well crafted, very well made, and so I think it deserves a 7 out of 10. It's not that great, but decent.
And you know what that means? It means it's the time for the show. It's the end of the round, the end of the show, and I can reveal that the final points are Michael's team with 7 points, but the winners this week are Luke's team with 12 points. Well done, Luke's team. I've been your host, Michael. I shouldn't say my surname. We'll bleep it. And this isn't a game show, is it? Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for our movie review podcast. And next week, I can tell you that we will be reviewing Arrival, because we are going to be reviewing last year's Oscar winners in various categories. Arrival, I think, won in something like visual effects or something like that. We'll be reviewing last year's Oscar winners in the run-up to the 2018 Oscars, and hopefully we'll be able to decide that last year's Oscar winners were all wrong and they were all terrible.
Yes, that is what we were hoping to do.
Yes, thank you, and
thanks for watching Select and Reflect.
Goodbye.